Hi, it's Dwyer. It is Wednesday, August 10th, 2022. Always 1776.com, a free site. Gamblersadvisory.com, a free site. Remember, nothing I say here should be construed as financial advice. I'm just sharing how I see the world. The opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, in September of last year, on my pay site, Dwyer70905.substack.com, I wrote an article where I made the claim that I thought we were headed toward deflation, not inflation, over the long term. Right? I see Cathie Wood, and I agree with Cathie Wood. Right? I see Cathie Wood is openly talking about deflation in her videos for investors. Understand, I still believe that deflation ultimately is going to rule the day. Right now, it doesn't look that way. Right now, we're having a bear market rally. A lot of people are speculating that the Fed is going to pivot. It's going to stop raising the Fed funds rate, or at least slow down the rate of increase, and that, we'll have a looser money policy sooner rather than later. Right? What I want people to understand, right? And I disagree with that. Let's hope it doesn't happen. I'd like to see a scenario like the one we had early in the Warren Harding administration, where Harding was able to minimize the depression of the early 1920s, right, by cutting spending, not by having loose monetary policy and all this government spending, right? I'm dismayed, quite frankly, that we have things called an Inflation Reduction Act, right, that actually calls for government spending during a time of inflation. Well, let me just point out here for people, because I talk with a lot of folks, and it's amazing to me that there isn't greater understanding. Artificially low interest rates hurt working class, middle class, and young people. Right? One would think, hey, cheap money, where do we lose? Let me just tell you, you lose almost across the board. Right? With regard to working and middle class people, if you're a cop, if you're a fireman, if you're a teacher, if you're a public employee with a pension, you should understand that pensions require at least a 6 to 7% rate of return in order to pay beneficiaries. Right? The pension fund has to grow, folks. It has to have money to pay its beneficiaries. Now, that's hard to do when the interest rate is down at 2% on the 10-year. Right? Then, of course, the pension fund has to make up the shortfall from investments in the stock market. Right, folks? Understand, even some of the world's best stocks, Meta, Google, Apple, have been down of late. Right? Let's also be real here for a moment. The person running your pension fund is unlikely to be Warren Buffett or Ray Dalio. Right? Just being realistic. It's likely they're a politically connected appointee who might be savvy politically but might not be savvy economically. Let's also understand what 2% interest on the 10-year does in working and middle-class neighborhoods. It makes houses unaffordable, right? Simply put, there are too many people borrowing money, trying to profit off the spread between house appreciation and the artificially low mortgage rates that correspond with a 2% yield on the 10-year, right? For young people and working class people to be able to compete with their house bids. Let me also point out, too, that a 2% yield on the 10-year also leads rich people to speculate in the market, right? After all, the cost of capital is so cheap. If they see housing increasing in value, they're going to start competing in working class and middle class housing markets with people who actually need those homes to live in. Let me also point out that a 2% yield on the 10-year leads to kids, teenagers, spending too much time in school, right? Going to college when they shouldn't, staying in college and pursuing advanced degrees when they shouldn't. Because, of course, the student loans are too affordable, or so they seem. Behind the curtain, the colleges see insatiable demand, right? Students willing to pay the tuition, willing to borrow money to pay the tuition. So colleges start hiking up tuitions. Where does it lead? It leads to today's student loan crisis, which many young debtors, young people who went to colleges on student loans, realize is an acute problem right now for society. Right? Many young people are going to have to work into their 30s just to pay off their student loan debt. Things would be different if the interest rates were higher and people had an appreciation of the payback amounts on their student loans on the front end before they sign off on the loan. Right? So cheap capital has a lot of casualties. Understand, too, with cheap capital, you're going to have increased borrowing by corporations to buy back their own stock. Right? Corporations are going to start over-leveraging themselves. Right? With higher interest rates, corporations have to pick and choose what they do with borrowed money. When you lower the interest rate, if the board feels that the stock price isn't high enough, it's going to start buying back stock, and that can blow up on you. As I mentioned earlier in this video, some great stocks, Google for example, are down in terms of stock price over the last 6 months. You can imagine some fly-by-night companies who have bought back their stock, who, after buying back their stock, still have a plunging stock price, leaving that company with a debt and a lower stock price. Let me also point out, too, that the cheap money, right, the money that's just too cheap, ultimately has led to the birth of an alternative economy. Right? People tired of losing the value of their fiat currency went out and develop Bitcoin. Right? Groundbreaking innovation. Understand too, it doesn't end there. Now you have young people learning the difference between fiat currency and sound money. Right? You have young people understanding that their money can actually appreciate for them. It doesn't have to lose value. The world doesn't have to be inflationary. So, where we are right now, in my opinion, is we're headed for a recession / a depression. Right? I don't want to engage in semantics here. Right? Like the Biden administration is doing, saying, well, technically, we're not in a recession. Right, folks? Can we agree that we have stagflation? We have little to no growth economically, and we have that coupled with inflation right now. So, I believe long term we end up with deflation. On the road there, over the, we'll call it medium term, I'm expecting unemployment to hit 8%. I'm expecting much more downside in housing. Much more. Right? Whatever is happening in Idaho, whatever is happening in Arizona, folks, this is the tip of the iceberg. Right? I think housing is going to drop by at least another 20%. Right? I think you're looking at a prolonged period of little appreciation. Right? The housing appreciation of the last 2 years, that's artificial. That's an outlier. Right? Let me also point out that I'm expecting the credit bubble to burst. Right? You have people with 5, 6 credit cards in their wallets right now. I'm expecting a lot of people to get turned down for further credit. I'm expecting credit card companies to start cutting existing credit lines. I believe that's going to lead to less consumption by people with a lot of credit card debt. I also feel that you're going to have social unrest. Right? People demanding things of government that, quite frankly, the government can't deliver. Right? Understand, folks, the government cannot guarantee you a job. That was evident in the 1980s with the fall of the Berlin Wall. We must have forgotten. Right? Government can try to guarantee you a job. In the end, they can't deliver. Because a job is supposed to be based on a need, a demand. Right? I can't promise you a job when there isn't the demand for the work. Right? So all this talk we had about shovel-ready jobs, that was bogus. If you think your local city can promise you a job, just ask yourself, is the city having problems raising revenue? If it is, then any promise that they have of giving you a job and sharing that revenue with you is hollow. Let's face it too. You're going to have landlord defaults because, of course, in many parts of the country, landlords could not evict non-paying tenants. Right? There's an acute situation right now in Southern California where landlords are demanding the right to evict non-paying tenants. right? You're going to have pension defaults. CalPERS is one of the biggest pensions in the United States, right, folks? Rather than make 6 to 7% rate of return, and keep in mind, we're coming off of, a period of great stock appreciation. CalPERS recently lost 6%. Right now, CalPERS is healthier, more influential than most pensions across the United States. Right? Just understand that you have a lot of pension plans who have been dealing with an inability to buy government bonds and to get 5-6% off those government bonds. Right? They're trying to get to the 6 to 7% threshold needed to pay their beneficiaries. So they've had to experiment in the market. Let me just point out, as I said earlier, some of the best investments in the market are down in terms of stock price over the last 6 months. How successful do you think these pension plans have been investing in the market, seeking alpha? Let's also pop some bubbles here. I know this Inflation Reduction Act talked about green energy and things like that. I'm fading green energy. Right, folks? I'm in Northern California. I can tell you, when I drive to my office in Mountain View, I see EVs all over the road and stuff like that. This is Teslaville out here. Right? I understand there's a transition. But you're kidding yourself if you think that wind and solar are going to replace fossil fuels and coal anytime soon. Also, next month, my family is going to drive down to San Diego. Right? Thank God we're in a car that has an internal combustion engine. I wouldn't want to be between here and LA on the 5 highway, depending on being able to charge my electric vehicle. Right, folks? The infrastructure is just not there. Right? You understand the importance of fossil fuels. When the President of the United States has to cross the Atlantic to travel to Saudi Arabia to try to convince them to increase their oil production. You understand the importance of fossil fuels when a technologically advanced country like Germany is in crisis because they follow the EU crowd in trying to sanction Russia for the Ukrainian invasion, right? And they diminish their use of Russian oil. Folks, Germany right now economically is in tatters. So let's talk about demographics. People are talking about the problems that Japan and China are having demographically. Right? They don't seem to have enough young people to replace the older generation. Right? Just understand the acute demographical problems of Japan and China are going to kill the idea of deglobalization, because those countries are going to have to loosen their immigration policies. They're going to have to lure and welcome in immigrants. They're going to have to give them inducements. They're going to have to, rather than engage in deglobalization, they're going to have to reach out to the rest of the world to replenish their younger generations. Now, you have ghost cities right now in China. I'm guessing in the coming years, they're going to be importing in droves immigrants. and they're going to be offering them sweet deals to live in what are now ghost cities. Now, the only deglobalization that I see coming is going to be the pullback by certain countries from these multinational outfits like the European Union. Right? If I'm Germany and I have spent a long time trying to avoid the pitfalls of the Weimar Republic, and I've been financially responsible, very prudent, why do I want to throw my lot in with the Italians, who've been much looser in terms of their monetary policy? Why do I want my debt to be priced like the Italian debt? Right? Let's talk NATO. I understand Finland and Sweden are rushing to join NATO. That seems to be the flavor of the month, right? Being in NATO. If I'm the United States of America, what's in it for me? I thought it was absolutely ridiculous that after Russia invaded the Ukraine, that we were being asked to involve our U.S. military on behalf of the Ukraine. I thought it was ridiculous that some of these NATO countries were actually talking about providing military support. What is the United States doing in an organization that's going to put our safety at risk? Shouldn't the only outfit that decides when to use the U.S. military be the United States of America? Right, folks? Countries have different agendas. Right? I don't want to be beholden to other countries, especially when we're subsidizing them militarily. Right? So in terms of deglobalization, no, I don't believe the global economy is going to delink. I think that's a promise that politicians and people like Steve Bannon make to convince Rust Belt states here in the United States that America's bringing manufacturing back. Right, folks? I just don't see that happening. We're in a new world where even China's losing manufacturing. We're in a new world where the argument might answer itself in a few years with the rise of 3D printing, right? Which might enable American companies to manufacture their goods in the United States, but which would be capital intensive, not labor intensive. Right, folks? Put simply, the 1940s are gone. So let me just say, the only deglobalization I see are countries waking up. I'm expecting more Brexits. I'm expecting more countries saying, hey, you know what? We're going to go our own way here. Right? The group thing isn't really working out for us. When certain countries are a little bit looser with their financial management than we are, we want the benefits of being prudent financially. We don't want to pay the costs of being involved in multinational outfits that are going to put our national defense at risk. Right? We want to be able to, in our way, tell Russia, look, invading a country as you're doing in the Ukraine isn't a good idea. Right? While also having Russian oil. In fact, let's go one step further. You know why Russia invaded the Ukraine? It's because of NATO encroachment. Right? I believe going forward, some of these NATO countries are quietly going to say, look, let's not engage in encroachment in this manner. right? Think about the United States. Here in America, we have the Monroe Doctrine, right? It's a bit preposterous that we then are participating in some NATO setup where we're standing by as the Ukraine flirts with joining NATO as a bordering country to Russia, right? So let's talk about what's going to go up, in my opinion, as we have this economic downturn, right? Again, I'm expecting 8% unemployment. Folks, this looks like a return to portions of the 1970s to me. I remember that as a kid. You see the gray here, right? So what's going to go up? In one word, Bitcoin, right? Let's offer another idea. Bitcoin miners, companies that facilitate the use of Bitcoin, make it easier, make it more convenient, make it easier to understand for new users, right? Understand too, I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist. I believe DeFi takes off as well, right? I just don't know how legacy finance, the system that we had of banks, brick and mortar banks, right? Expensive pieces of commercial real estate in the most expensive parts of our most expensive cities. I just don't know how they can compete with click and order, with decentralization, with greater transparency. I don't think they can and maintain their margins, right? Let me say this too. I need for people to understand the profound change in banking that's coming. If Bitcoin is the apex predator of the financial world, that people like former MicroStrategy CEO Michael Saylor believe, right? If Bitcoin is going to go to 100,000, 500,000, a million, and understand I'm one of those people who believe it is long term, then you're going to have people who will never sell their Bitcoin, but who want to tap into the wealth they have to buy things like houses, cars, college educations. So you're going to have the financial industry reconfiguring to figure out a way to tap into the equity of Bitcoin without requiring the user to sell the Bitcoin. Understand that's going to have a profound impact on a lot of things, including tax collection, right? Because if I'm just tapping into the equity, if I'm borrowing money off my Bitcoin, if my Bitcoin's being used as collateral, that's not a taxable transaction, as it would be if I were to sell the Bitcoin to afford the house, right? So the financial sector is going to have to cater to Bitcoin holders, right? How can legacy finance compete with DeFi and the cryptoverse? In doing so, I don't think they can. Let's talk about other things that are going to increase in value. I believe remote providers, right? People who can actually service you remotely are going to thrive. So, medicine that's online, where I can send a sample to some medical outfit and a doctor can then, over the internet, talk with me. For example, right now, you have minoxidil services that have popped up online where they are able to give you minoxidil. You talk with the doctor online, and they provide you with hair growth products online. Um, these test kits that you get from remote providers where you can, submit a sample and find out if you're diabetic. These mental health online doctors where you can say, hey, I'm having problems, and talk with a therapist without being in the therapist's office. I believe services like that are going to thrive. Services that deliver to you, right? The things you need. Understand, Amazon right now has entered into the pharmacy business, right? They can deliver medication to you, right? Amazon, of course, is an online retailer that can deliver to you clothes, that can deliver to you groceries, that can deliver to you online video content, Prime Video. I know Amazon has had a little bit of a rough go of late. I expect Amazon to thrive going forward, right? Also, I believe we're on the verge of people taking virtual vacations, right? Understand, the metaverse has improved by leaps and bounds. Right now, we have emojis and things like that people use in the metaverse. Well, as bandwidth continues to expand, right, as virtual worlds continue to develop, I believe companies like Meta, and Meta has had a rough go of it in the stock market over the last 6 months, but Meta is investing heavily in the metaverse, right? Its version of the metaverse. I understand Ethereum's Vitalik Buterin has said that he doesn't believe a centralized company like Meta will be king in the metaverse, that the winner of metaverse development is going to be decentralized, right? Let me just say, I believe both can happen, right? All Meta has to do is to provide a unique experience that resonates with customers. I believe we're going to start having virtual vacations, right? I can physically go to Vegas, right? Be it the Venetian or the MGM and bet on sports and stuff like that. Or I can go into a metaverse and have a Vegas type experience where I'm in a sports book virtually with other fans, right? While I'm betting on sports. You already have in something like 20 states legalized sports betting, right? I believe the metaverse can bring the social element in. So rather than me just placing bets, I can actually be in a virtual chat room with people who can decide whether they want to show their actual selves or whether they want to use a cartoon figure to represent themselves, right? And I believe people are going to start having those kind of experiences, right? It'll go hand in hand with the actual experience. In other words, maybe I visit France remotely. Then if I like the experience, I can then go to France and visit the actual places, the Louvre, the Eiffel Tower, Cannes, south of France, Marseille, wherever, right? So I believe those are the companies that are going to start to explode, right, in the coming months. Let's see what happens, but just understand, I believe we're really in a period where you're looking at flat stock movement, right? Let me just say, I went to high school in New York City. from the late 70s to the early 80s. And during that time, right, at a high school that was known in New York City, where a lot of people went to Ivy League colleges, I can't recall one person saying that they wanted to work on Wall Street, right? Not one person. Let me point out, too, that some of the giants in finance actually started working on Wall Street during that period of time. Jim Chanos, the famed short seller, talks about how he was earning more money in his summer blue-collar job than he was making when he started on Wall Street. Right? The world was different then. Understand, too, Manhattan had shaky neighborhoods then. Neighborhoods that now are, cream of the crop. Walking through Central Park back then was viewed as hazardous. Right? Let's remember the preppy murder, Robert Chambers. That's late 80s. Right? That's what Central Park used to be. Right? People going to Central Park late at night to do the most bizarre things. Right? Then we hit an era of high debt where money started flowing, where a Wall Street career got changed. People like Jim Rogers, famed investor, I'm talking about cream of the crop, talks about how when he got to Wall Street was really a backwater. Right? Not a glamorous job. Not the glamorous job that it is now. Right? I believe we're going to get back to a period like that. It takes years to develop. But where people start to question whether you can make a living selling stocks. I want folks watching this video to look at the S&P 500's performance from 1968 to 1981. Right, folks? The decade of the 70s was flat. Now, while I'll concede we have much more information, the internet has developed now, right? The cycles seem to be a little bit shorter now, right? I believe we're entering a period of protracted, subdued growth. Some, Jim Rickards, would argue we're already in that period right now. Just understand, you have a government that's telling us, well, first, inflation's transitory. Now, well, 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth isn't technically a recession. Right? We're in the denial stage right now. Eventually, it will become a way of life. Right? You're going to look around you and you're going to think to yourself, wow, you mean to tell me there was a time when the price of the average home in San Francisco, a city of hundreds of thousands of people, was $1.6 million. Right? You're seeing major price shifts. You're seeing a reallocation of years of misallocation. And that's going to have a profound effect on us. Right? I believe at the end of the day, the new economy, we'll call it the sound money economy. Not just Bitcoin, but precious metals, gold, silver. I believe that eventually will take over because the horse is out of the barn with Bitcoin. Right? I don't think governments will be able to crack down on it. And I believe once the working and middle class understands that fiat currency hurts them, right? That having a system where the median house in San Francisco was going for $1.6 million prices them out of the market. With sound money, that would never happen. Anyway, that's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.